Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to Talk Like a Leader. And now I have with me again this week, Karl Smith, my friend and colleague. How you doing, Karl?
Hey, Guy. It's great to be here again. Thank you.
Good to be with you, man. And we're going to pick up our conversation from last week. It's a continuing conversation on perspectives about time. So our first episode was about just kind of some general ideas about the differences between different people's perspectives on time. Last week, we talked about some basically warnings and cautions and awareness issues for people that have task-oriented traits, or if you're working with a person that has task-oriented traits, how could you be misinterpreted or misunderstood, and how can you better adjust your perspective so you can be better at connecting, communicating with people. And this week we're going to go to the other side of the DISC spectrum and talk about people who are more people-oriented perspective. And I'm going to turn over to Karl and say, okay, Karl, what are some of the natural perspectives that people with people-oriented traits, people like you, have with regard to time? And what are some of the lessons you've learned about how you can be misinterpreted and how you can better adjust to be clear from a leadership perspective about what your perspective is or what you expect from other people?
Sure. So my perspective many times without thinking, is this sense of flexibility, this sense of focusing on how time impacts other people, whether it's a meeting, whether it is us getting together, whether it is whatever, 9 times out of 10, whatever the situation is, it's this whole filter of relationship and connecting with people. I'll say this, the challenge with that perspective of having that flexibility that I've gotten feedback from other people is, okay, Karl, what time are we starting again? What's really important? And so I have to be very focused on communicating clearly of what that is and what that looks like, and not be as not to be overly sensitive to how time impacts other people. It's like we say we're going to start at 9, we need to start at 9.
So I'm hearing 2 things there. One is the idea that you've learned to be aware that some people specifically like me, when you say 9 o'clock, it means 9 o'clock, as opposed to it means somewhere around 9 o'clock, probably after, not before. And be aware of that awareness, or be aware of that potential miscommunication, so that you don't leave people hanging or unintentionally frustrate them because they're thinking you're going to start at a specific time. Is that one of the learning lessons that you have?
Yes. And I'll say one of the other things for me is really knowing the other person. For instance, there are people in my life that time is very important to, and it's respecting that, and it's doing my best to make sure that not only am I on time, and maybe even a little bit early, depending on the situation, but it's this, if the drive for Karl is to have a good relationship and a good connection with people, I must be willing to look at other people's perspective. And I think that's really what all this is about.
I think you're right. Yeah. Whichever side of the equation you happen to fall on.
Right.
It's about understanding the other side.
Right.
Well, there was a second thing I heard you say that it was kind of buried in there. I'll call attention to it, is the idea that you've become aware that just because they're focused on time, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't care about you as a person.
Yes.
And so you've had to develop, at least I think this, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but here's what I was taken out of that you've had to develop, I guess, like a little thickness of skin around time, to realize that just because a person's pushing for a specific time, or anxious to get started, or maybe even a little bit irritated or frustrated because you were, in their eyes, late, that doesn't necessarily mean your relationship's in jeopardy. And
Yes.
so you have to hear it a little differently and just kind of realize this is their deal and their frustration, not necessarily directed at Karl.
Yes.
So what are some of the ways you found to navigate that more successfully, to manage that tension where you have your natural perspective of time and you're interacting now with a person who has a different view of what time means or how they value the time? How have you figured out to navigate that more successfully?
Well, I think it's for me, it's because I want the connection. I want it to be a positive experience. I want them to think well of me.
Mm-hmm.
My goal, my focus needs to be and should be, well, be on time, Karl. Don't start another project. Don't start another project 2 minutes before you're supposed to be somewhere else. Or it again, and this is something that Kevin Eichenberry has said, is choice management.
Management, yeah.
Yeah, and so many times, at least for me, from a people perspective, is I will put too much on my plate and not be realistic about what I can actually get accomplished.
Is the putting too much on your plate because you're trying to get more done or because you're trying to please more people?
This may sound totally in left field, but a lot of times it's to simplify. It's
Okay.
to go through things to make things easier, to go through things so I can focus more and not have the distractions. It looks like a task, but really what's driving me is a sense of comfortability, and it's more of a feel than actual, okay, I've got to get this done because I want to see this result. Yeah, to a degree, but really a lot of it is so that there's this sense of comfortability or this sense of I can focus on more things because I don't have so much coming at me at one time.
So there's this personal comfort, flexibility. The driver is more about comfort and ease and flexibility than it is about accomplishment. Is that fair?
9 times out of 10, yes.
Oh, and I like the way you said that, 9 times out of 10. Because again, we're talking about generalities and tendencies, not absolutes, because context matters a lot. We're trying to get to the idea, where can we miscommunicate with each other? So if I'm working with Karl, I've got a task or perspective, and my view is not about how comfortable are we. It's about how much did we get done. I want more things checked off my list. I want more accomplishment in that day. And we get to, here's part of the danger is that Karl and his desire to be comfortable can frustrate me and my desire to get things done.
Yes.
And Guy and his desire to get things done can frustrate Karl by making him uncomfortable.
Yes.
And there's the rub. If we can figure out how to navigate that difference and be clear with each other and specific with each other, you're thinking something, Karl. I can
Yes,
hear it.
I am. And so what's interesting is the very thing that you are wanting, if it's rigid, is the very thing that I struggle with. In navigating this, and I'll say this, one of the things that I think that you've done a marvelous job in developing for listeners and for folks that apply this in their own organization is the team report. It talks about how to create the right environment for people to be more effective with each other and to understand different perspectives. So
you're talking about the team report at dispersonalitytesting.com, the idea that it helps frame for people what is the environment we're working in, and hopefully apply some objectivity to the context.
Yes.
So that we're better able to read the situation we're in
and
adjust to the mix of people who happen to be present on this team, and do that with some more intentionality being one of kind of the key focus areas of a lot of the work we talk about with applying this model, intentionality.
Yes.
Okay, so I probably need to start bringing this to a close. We are talking about time, so I want to honor time. Like we talked about last week, thinking about the person as task or perspective, being aware of how you can be misinterpreted and aware of how your focus on time might damage the relationship if you're not sensitive to it. Well, give the warning that once again, we're not talking about absolutes. We're not talking about giving up your view of the world or view of time. It's more about being aware of the views other people bring to the table so that you can navigate those differences more successfully. And as Karl said, there are times when people with a task-oriented perspective can come across too harsh and too rigid, and that causes him then to back away and not get as much done. So by being rigid, I actually get less of what I want. And on the opposite side, it's also true that Karl and his desire to be flexible and easygoing can frustrate me and cause me to push harder, which causes him to back away. And oh my goodness, what a mess we find ourselves in.
Right.
So if we can figure out a way to navigate that tension and just be sensitive to and aware of the different perspectives that each person brings to the table, we can cut each other some slack. We can find better ways to be more clear about our specific expectation and understanding rather than assuming other people have the same expectation we have. The better we get at doing that, the more we can talk like a leader. So yes. Our warning for people with people-oriented perspective is to be aware that people with a heavy task-oriented perspective are probably more rigid in their view of time than you are. It doesn't make them bad people. It makes them have a different perspective from yours. So if you can learn to be more clear, more specific, you'll probably navigate that difference better, and you'll probably feel less stressed as you help them understand your view and navigate towards their view more successfully. Learn how to see both sides of the time equation. Learn how to understand both people's perspective. Learn how to make adjustments for both sides of the equation. And you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.